It's nice to see you all. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thanks for joining us from wherever you are today. Today's March 27th, 2025, and this is our 9th and penultimate webinar in the series focused on history of people, forests, and forestry. The series is, as always, co-hosted by the Forest School at the Yale School of the Environment and our friends over at the Forest History Society. My name is Gary Dunning. I'm the executive director of the Forest School here at the Yale School of the Environment, based in New Haven, Connecticut. And I look out my window. It's a very warm, well, not very warm, actually. It's kind of cool, but very sunny day. So it's a nice day here. I'm one of your hosts of the series, and I'll be introducing today's webinar. The other two co-hosts I'd like to introduce is Professor Mark Ashton. Mark is the Morris K. Jessup Professor of Silviculture and Forest Ecology and the Director of Yale Forests, based here at the Yale School of the Environment. And of course, Tanya Moons. Tanya Moons is the President and CEO of the Forest History Society, and Tanya is based in Durham, North Carolina in the US. And I think, as you all know by now, throughout the spring, this YFF webinar series has explored the histories of people, forests, and forestry. And after today, we just have one more session left. It feels like the session has gone by, the series has gone by very quickly, but I know I've learned a lot, and very much looking forward to today's discussion and presentation. And as a reminder, as always, the webinar presentations run roughly 30 minutes with audience Q&A to follow. I want to note to all of you that if you have questions, it's best if you ask your questions earlier than at the very, very end when we're about to end the webinar, because it's easier for us to ask your questions if you get them in early. So just a bit of advice if you want to get a question in. Again, I think as most know by now, each of these sessions in the series are recorded and they are made available on the Yale Forest Forum's website shortly after each session. If you have any questions related to the series, let us know at yff@yale.edu. Now, I'm really happy to introduce today's speaker, B. Mohan Kumar. Dr. Kumar is the chairman of the Research Council for the Karelia Forest Research Institute. He's a leading researcher in agroforestry and agroecology. He served as Vice Chancellor for Arunachal University of Studies in Namsai, India, until early 2023, and has since worked as a freelance consultant. Over his distinguished career, he's held several positions, including Assistant Director General in agronomy, agroforestry, and climate change at the Indian Council of Agricultural Research in New Delhi. He's been Dean and Professor at the School of Ecology and Environmental Studies in Nalanda University, Rajir, and Associate Dean of Forestry at Karelia Agricultural University. He's a PhD graduate from the Indian Agricultural Research Institute in New Delhi. Currently, Dr. Kumar serves as Associate Editor of Frontiers in Sustainable Food Systems and Agroforestry Systems. Mohan's talk today is titled From Pre-Vedic Pedigrees to Recent Times, India's Forestry Traditions. And with that, Mohan, I am going to hand it over to you. Great to see you, and please take it away.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, let me express my gratitude to the Yale Forestry School and also the Forest History Society based out in North Carolina, of which the CEO of which is Tanya, who is present here today. Thank you so much to all of you for inviting me to make this particular presentation. Let me now share my slide. Okay, the topic I'm going to discuss today is from the pre-Vedic pedigrees to recent times, India's forestry traditions. In this, I will be briefly talking about how the ancient Indian civilization nurtured forestry, starting with the pre-Vedic times, that is the so-called Indus Valley Civilization, and we'll talk briefly about the developments in between and until the current scenario. Okay. This is the timeline for my deliberations. First, of course, I will start with the Indus Valley or Harappan or the Mohenjo-daro civilization dating back to 3,300 to 1,900 before the current era. This will be followed by the Vedic times, 1500 to 500 BCE, and the late Vedic period up to the Middle Kingdoms of India. Then briefly about the British era and also Islamic. I may not be talking much about Islamic era in this presentation today, and briefly also about the modern India's forestry scenario. Okay, this map shows this is a map of India during the Indus Valley Civilization era, something like 2,500, corresponds to the year 2,500 BCE. Approximately about 500 years back, there was a flourishing civilization called the Indus Valley Civilization in the northwestern part of India. It developed sophisticated cities, also invented sewage systems, advanced sewage systems that predated the ancient Rome's sewage systems. However, by 1800 BCE, the Harappans or the Mohenjo-darans or the Indus Valley people abandoned their cities, moving to smaller villages in the Himalayan foothills. What caused this migration of the Harappans to the Himalayan foothills was, of course, climate change. Beginning approximately 2500 BCE, there was a shift in temperatures and weather patterns over the Indus Valley area, and with the result of reduced summer monsoons. The Indus Valley people were largely agrarians, and they were following rain-fed or monsoon-fed agriculture. And when the summer monsoon rains gradually decreased around 2500 BCE, agriculture became difficult or impossible on most of these Harappan sites. That actually led to the migration of these people. And the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in the USA recently found, about 10 years back or so, found evidence that climate change was the predominant reason why the Harappans were forced to settle far away from the floodplains of the Indus River. Okay, few papers are published and some are mentioned here. Okay, the Harappans or the Indus Valley people were, as I mentioned earlier, agrarians for practicing rain-fed or monsoon-fed agriculture. They were also tree worshippers, and they worshipped trees and animals. According to Sir John Marshall, a leading archaeologist, incidentally, he was the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India in the British times. He mentions that one of the important trees that the Mohenjo-darans worshipped was the people tree or Ficus religiosa. On the right-hand side, you see a seal, a Harappan terracotta seal showing this people tree in it. And of course, you also find two mythological creatures. Could be crocodiles. I mean, they call it in Sanskrit makara. So, and then below that, you also find the impressions of a people leaf found in the upper clay levels in Harappa. You can see the red bordered area shows the people leaf markings, impressions of the people leaf. And on the right-hand side, you also find a fresh people leaf. Not only people or ficus religiosa was worshipped, there were other trees also mentioned in the Indus Valley inscriptions that were excavated over a period of time, primarily during the 20th century. And one of the epigraphs actually mentioned that people tree grew in association with another plant, that is navel, which is Flacourtia indica. And the inscriptions also mention about other trees like, Albizia labak, acacia species, probably Acacia nilotica, and few other acacias also. But it is doubtful whether the Harappans worship these plants. Only once acacia has been mentioned in the inscriptions, which they seem to have worshipped. And there is also, on the right-hand side, you also see a beautiful terracotta tablet with a tree, which was discovered in Harappa in 1995. Growing from a low platform, this sinuous tree with short leaves may have been held sacred like the people tree, according to some archaeologists. Significantly, the Harappans also used the tree as, or many trees as natural courtrooms, below the canopy of which they used to, the judges used to pass their judgments when settling litigations. The Harappans actually used, they extensively made use of timber, which also caused some amount of deforestation, as we will see as we go along. So they actually required huge quantities of timber or firewood for making, copper and bronze. I mean, the smelting of copper particularly. And they also used to make jewelry of glazed fans. This also required a firewood, and baked bricks, pottery, stoneware, boards, furniture, etc. All these required wood, and they were using wood extensively. And they also used to make coffins using scented woods like Deodara, citrus, Deodara, and Dalbergia latifolia, that is rosewood. And it's amazing to note that they used jujube or Sisyphus Marciana wood to make wooden mortar for pounding grains, implying that they had the knowledge of this particular timber having shock-absorbing qualities. Wood charcoal remains have been found extensively in the archaeological sites of Harappa, and many species, many charcoals from many tree species were discovered. Some include the acacia, Acacia catechu, Acacia nilotica, Prosopis cineraria, Tamarix, Dalbergia, sissoo, etc. And some of the tools that they were using is also shown on the right-hand side. You can see a copper celt from the Kuram Valley in Pakistan. And you also can see bronze axle adds excavated from Mohenjo-daro. Socketed and flat axes were found at many sites, including Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and Lothal. And they were used for chopping and also shaping wood for construction and shipbuilding. Presumably, as I mentioned in the beginning, some amount of deforestation occurred as a result of this extensive use of timber. The Harappans also used to export timber. They had extensive trade with the Mesopotamian civilization, which dates around 6,500 BC. So they had long-distance trade with Mesopotamia. Apart from timber, the Indus Valley people also used to export gold, jewelry, ivory seals, and so many other things, including textiles. And regarding timber for Mesopotamia had only very limited natural forests. So they had to obtain timber from other regions or other sources, including from Punjab, that is in northwestern India and Pakistan, which is part of the Indus Valley Civilization. In the ruins of a temple in Iraq, archaeological excavations have clearly shown that Indian teak, Tectona grandis, remains were found, which clearly attest to the fact that the Mesopotamians imported Indian timber, or there was export of Indian timber to Babylon. And the foundations of this temple probably was constructed much before the excavation, much before the time that is mentioned here. So the temple was rebuilt 2 times during the 6th century BCE, but the foundation was probably laid earlier and reconstruction was done. So the point is that Indian teak was imported to Babylon for a long time. And the teak was also used by the Babylons to construct brick masonry, perhaps as a tie beam. You can see on the right-hand side 2 pictures. One, of course, the trade connection between Indus Valley and Mesopotamia, top. At the bottom, you see a picture showing a historical reconstruction of an ancient Mesopotamian structure featuring a teak wood tie beam integrated into the baked brick masonry. Teak they used to integrate with the brick masonry as a tie beam. Teak was obtained from the Gir forest in Panchmahal, Surat, that is western part of India. Timber also was obtained by the Indus Valley people from Himalayas. Okay, the northeastern Punjab and the western Ghats were probably the areas that suffered deforestation on account of this extraction of timber by the Indus Valley people. There were a pronounced, prominent shipbuilding tradition in India at that time. And it is interesting to note that much of the trade was routed from the Gujarat coast at the delta of the Indus River, primarily from locations where major settlements have occurred during the Indus Valley time, like Lothal, Balakot, and other locations. And they may have been primarily determined by the access to riverine and sea transport. So, and there are many representations of boats found on the Indus Valley ceilings, clay models, amulets, and pottery. On the right-hand side, you see the pictures of a seal, which was excavated from the Indus Valley, and also a terracotta amulet from Mohenjo-daro, which depict a ship with a cabin, with a central cabin, and 2 birds. Now, the birds are called deshkak, and they were used by the navigators in the olden times to find directions. In the Mesopotamian Empire, especially during the time of the Sargon the Great, something like 2300 BCE, who was the first ruler of the Arthurian Empire. He mentions that ships from Meluha, that is the Mesopotamians used to call Indus Valley as Meluha, and of course from Oman and other places used to reached there. And then timber, of course, was a very valuable resource for boat or shipbuilding in the Harappan culture. And besides, they were also, as we have discussed, used for construction of timbers and of course other structures. And teak wood for the Indus Valley people presumably has come mostly from Malabar and central India. According to some evidences that are available from the excavation sites of the IVC, they have exported teak wood from Lothal, which is now situated in Gujarat. The rest of the IVC, many of the major sites in IVC, like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, are in Pakistan right now. Okay, over about 5,000 years ago, this was a IVC or Harappan was a flourishing civilization. However, mysteriously it collapsed around 3,900 years ago. So the primary reason, as I hinted at the beginning, was climate change. There was a pronounced aridification, or aridification intensified in the Indus Valley area after about 5,000 years before the present. And approximately 3,000 years ago, the total settled area and settlement sizes in the IVC declined and many sites were abandoned. You can see on the right-hand side, the top pane actually indicates the summer monsoon. You can see around 5,000 or around 4,000 years before, there was a pronounced decline in the summer monsoon precipitation. Similarly, there was also around 3,000 years before, there was a pronounced decline for this area in the winter monsoon as well. The resultant hydroclimatic stress actually increased the vulnerability of agricultural production, supporting the Harappan urbanism. Harappa or Harappan civilization incidentally was an urban civilization. As we have seen earlier, they have developed sophisticated cities with advanced or innovative sewage systems. And beginning roughly 2500 BCE, there was a shift in temperature. There was a pronounced shift in temperatures and weather patterns over the Indus Valley area, which resulted in this reduction in the summer monsoons. And the result was that in the agriculture, it was difficult or almost next to impossible to practice agriculture in the near Harappan city, the areas that are close to the Harappan cities. And during that time, there was also some tectonic shifts. Some of the tributaries of Indus River actually changed course, and also there was a Harappan time, there was a river called Saraswati, which almost became ephemeral or completely dried up because of this drought or increasing aridification of this area. Okay, this is a graphical presentation of how climate change spurred the rise and fall of ancient civilizations. In the top, you can find the Harappan scenario. The Bay of Bengal, becomes saltier because of the droughts in this area. You can see saltier, and it becomes increasingly saltier. And then there was also an associated, because of the reduced summer and also to some extent the winter rainfall, there was a change in the vegetation attributes. You can see predominantly initially, the timeline is shown on the bottom axis. Initially 5,000 years ago, it was predominantly low trees and shrub. But then eventually with the increasing aridification, it becomes grassier. There was increasing or there were the grasses became dominant. And, you can also see that, before the drying, Harappans did extensive farming. And of course, it was all monsoon fed or fed by the annual river floods. When, these things, the monsoons declined, or the river flooding intensity also declined, agriculture became impossible. So they started migrating to the foothills of the Himalayas. But in the southern part, in the peninsular India, what happened was that initially the people were hunter-gatherers. And then with the increasing aridification, they started settled agriculture. And this is a kind of adaptation strategy which these people could employ, whereas the Harappans actually failed on that count. Okay, the migration of the Harappans actually coincided with the migration of Aryan people from the Aryan nomadic people. You can see this arrow from Central Asia into the Gangetic Plain area. Okay, and then this was actually the start of the so-called Vedic era or Vedic civilization, which was centered around the Indo-Gangetic Plain, this whole area. And this time also, this was the timeline following this around, 500 to 600 to 500 BCE, major cities, which were called Mahajanapadas, also developed in this area. The names are shown here in red, but I'm not trying to read that out. There were 16 of them. I will come back to this a little later. Okay, so the Vedic civilization flourished in the Indo-Gangetic Plain area. And this was the time when, major compilations of the so-called books of knowledge, which we call Vedas today, in Sanskrit they were composed. And there were 4 collections. These are basically Sanhitas or hymns. And there were 4 collections of these hymns. And these are called Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva. And it was the picture on the right-hand side lower region, you find the picture of a sage called Vedavyasa, who structured it. Until the time of Vedavyasa, this was kind of unstructured or unorganized. So it was Vedavyasa who organized and structured the hymns into these 4 collections like Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva. And over the centuries, 3 kinds of additional literature were also added to the Sanhitas. These are called the Brahmanas, which are discussions of the rituals, the Aranyakas. These are books recited and studied in the forest. And then, of course, Upanishads, the philosophical writings. Aranyakas actually was a connection between the Brahmanas and the Upanishads. So the Gangetic Plains during this time, or just before the arrival of the nomadic Aryans from the Central Asia, it was densely covered with monsoonal forests. And some of those early texts actually indicate this fact. The Satapada Brahmana, one of those processes that is actually associated with the Veda, Yajurveda, composed around 8th to 6th century BC, mentions that the area between the Saraswati River and the modern Ganjak River on the left bank of the Gangetic River, or Ganges, was a dense forest. The great Indian epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, also talk about the forest of this area. In fact, according to Mahabharata, Hastinapur, the capital of Kurus. It is essentially a story of a war between different factions of this Kuru dynasty, which ruled Hastinapur, one of those kingdoms, one of those Mahajanapadas. And the capital of capital Hastinapur was situated in a forested area, and the kingdoms of the Kuru kingdom and also the Panchala kingdom covered most of the upper Gangetic plains, and they were all located in forested areas. And modern recent research also indicated about the pollen records from Hastinapur, or the excavations conducted in Hastinapur area showed the presence of pollen from several tree species like some of these pines, Dalbergia sissoo, and of course Hollerina antidicentrica, and few other species. What happened was that Aryanization of this area preceded the burning of these dense monsoonal forests in the Gangetic plains. And samples of charwood dating back to about 2000 to 200 BCE have been located in one of those archaeological sites in Uttar Pradesh. And the trees that they have encountered there include some of these pines, the chirpine, Pinus roxburghia, Dalbergia sissoo, Tectona grandis, so on and so forth. The later Vedic period, actually, during the later Vedic period, the concept of forest became more structured, and three categories of forests were designated. These include the Shrivan. These include Shrivan, Tapovan, and Mahavan. Shrivan actually means forest of wealth. Tapovan, where you contemplate and seek the ultimate truth, as you see in the picture on the right-hand side, an artist view. And Mahavan, where the great natural forest where all species of life can find shelter, primarily for biodiversity conservation. In addition to these three types of forests, there were woodlands in and around houses in each village, and a village was never considered to be complete unless there is a cluster of 5 great trees, which symbolize the 5 primary elements of life, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether, or akasha, or sky. So these are called Panchavadi. So every village used to have a Panchavadi, which is nothing but a cluster of 5 great trees, which symbolize the 5 primary elements of life. And a committee of 5 elders called Panchayat was responsible for maintaining these village forests. Sustainability was an intrinsic theme or underlying theme of during the Vedic times, and one of those hymns in Atharva Veda states, I'm just reading the English translation, whatever I dig out from you, O earth, may that have quick regeneration again. May we not damage thy vital habitat and heart. This is, unquote. This is something very similar to the ecological sustainability that we often talk about today, which says that the harvest process per se may not have any long-term adverse effect on the regeneration of the harvested population in comparison to an equivalent unharvested population. So sustainability was kind of ingrained, or was the underlying theme of this, of the forestry or agricultural practices. Although the Aryans did a lot of deforestation in the beginning, eventually sustainability was given a place in the Vedic texts. So during the late Vedic period and beyond, this slide will talk briefly about that. So this would cover the Mahajanapada period, then the Maurya Empire, where I will briefly tell about the Emperor Ashoka, who was a prominent emperor, and he promoted afforestation in a big way. okay, the Middle Kingdoms. And during this late Vedic period, actually, agriculture emerged as a dominant economic activity. There were numerous descriptions of trees and groves and other aspects that were compiled during this late Vedic period. The most important among these compilations include, is of course Arthashastra by Chanakya or Kautilya. Okay, Arthashastra of Chanakya actually describes governance and also economics. In addition to that, it also, Arthashastra describes about the game laws. It prescribed game laws and also the roles and responsibilities of forest staff in conservation. And it also, Chanakya also recommended afforestation by establishing monocultural plantations. So it's about, say, the 4th century BC, 3rd and 4th century BC. Then came, the Krishi Parasara, agriculture by Parashara, laws of Manu or Manusmriti. And these are all texts, encyclopedic texts describing various aspects of life. Of course, Krishi Parasara talks about agriculture primarily. And the Matsya Purana, one of the oldest of the 18 post-Vedic Hindu scriptures, dating back to something like 250 to 500 current era, highlights the profound value of trees in the Indian thought, ancient Indian thought. One of the verses actually states that a pond equals 10 wells, a reservoir equals 10 ponds, a sun equals 10 reservoirs, and a tree equals 10 suns. Okay, so they attached during the late Vedic times, the people, the Indus Valley, the people in the Indo-Gangetic area attached a great deal of significance and importance to tree planting, to establishment of establishing trees. So then, of course, the Epic of Fire, there's another encyclopedic text talking about cosmology and many other aspects. This is also called Agni Purana, compiled during 700 to 800 of current era. Varaha Mihira's Brahat Samhita is an encyclopedic text, and the treatise on agriculture by Kashyapa, Kashyapiya Krishi Sukti as it is called, and the science of plant life by Surapala, or Surapala's Vrikshayurveda, Ayurveda, it describes the silviculture of trees there. And during this time, cultural landscapes such as sacred forests and groves also emerged. Emperor Ashoka, I mentioned about Emperor Ashoka, the great emperor, his empire extended from the northern India to Sri Lanka and to Indonesia. So the right-hand side, you see a modern artistic reconstruction of Emperor Ashoka. And of course, you also see a stupa relief, which was excavated from southern India. And it shows the emperor and also this wheel. It's called the Dharma Chakra, a Buddhist symbol of justice and law. Okay, and he was a great emperor. Did several forward-looking took several forward-looking decisions, and one of the important things that he did was that he issued 14 rock edicts. These rock edicts were issued primarily to propagate the Buddhist moral and ethnic code of conduct. So the second of these 14, the rock edict actually is shown here, and the translation of that, it's in Pali, and the translation in English is shown here, but I will not read that. So it highlights the importance of medicinal trees and shrubs. So shade trees, he decreed that, Ashoka decreed that shade trees should be planted along roads and fruit trees, and shade trees along the roadsides, and also fruit plants on the wastelands along the roadsides. He also instructed that wells should be dug and trees should be planted for the benefit of humans and animals, and hospitals for medical treatments of humans and animals were also established. Maybe perhaps for the first time, a veterinary or animal hospital was established in the whole world by Emperor Ashoka. So during this time, roughly corresponding to the Ptolemaic and the Roman Empire, so archaeology excavations at an ancient port city on Egypt's Red Sea coast, Berenike, has showed that there was a flourishing trade between India, especially southern India, as we'll see in a moment, and Rome Roman Empire during that time. So recycled teak timbers with the dowel holes of presumably dismantled from the Indian-built ships. They were excavated from Berenike, and they provide evidence of the mortise and tenon construction, which was used by the Romans in stabilizing walls, wooden walls. And the text, Periplus Maris Erythrae, a mid-1st century Graeco-Roman text, mentioned that Romans imported 3 types of timber from India. These are teak, rosewood, ebony, and the first products like teak and several other were also exported from the peninsular Indian port of Muziris. Of course, Muziris is now has disappeared without any trace over the last couple of millennia. Teak was also, it is believed that teak was used in the construction of Kaaba in Mecca. Okay, some of the evidences from Berenike, the artifacts, you can see ship timber and ropes from the harbor area, teakwood beam recycled from the late Roman era northern wall of the shrine Palmyrines. This was constructed by this Palmyrene Empire around this time, and they used, and one of the coral head walls actually preserved a leveling course made of teak timber. You can see it here, the red marked area, and cedar wood probably from Lebanon. Bollard was used in the harbor area. This they excavated. The colonial, then comes the colonial period. The next remarkable phase in the forestry history of India is the colonial time around the 19th century, when the British imperialists, fearing a timber famine, made serious efforts to establish man-made forests in different parts of India. So although they were talking about green imperialism and moral perspectives on environmental conservation to save the fragile ecosystems, the real motive was, of course, to impose state control over the natural forests and also to restrict the access of the indigenous people to the forest areas, which they have been enjoying for a long time. So 2 successful plantation drives I would like to mention. One, of course, is teak, the paragon among timbers at Nilambu in Malabar, and also Vattel. I will briefly mention about the Nilambu story, Nilambu teak story. Okay. So before the British also. Okay. The British actually annexed large teak-bearing forest areas after the Anglo-Burmese War of 1792. So, and of course, due to the strategic needs of the Royal Navy for quality timber for fighting against Napoleon, the English East India Company passed several laws and regulations restricting the harvesting of teak timber in southern India by the local people. And before the advent of the Europeans also, there was a thriving trade with Arab people, and there was a veritable fleet of vessels constructed using Malabar teak. This is a historic drawing of Calicut city, where you can find several, a fleet of vessels, trade vessels. Most of them are constructed using teak wood. And in here is this traditions continue even today. You can see a though being under construction in Bepur port near Calicut. So in 1996, a person by name William Makanoki was commissioned to establish a timber syndicate in Malabar, which he did. And the East India Company had a two-pronged strategy. First, of course, they wanted to protect teak in the natural forest and also then cultivate teak by establishing teak plantations. In 1800, the Bengal, in line with this, the Bengal, Second Bengal Bombay Joint Commission imposed a ban on felling of teak above a certain size, 21 inches in girth. And the Madras government actually nominated one Captain Joseph Watson as the first conservator of forests in India in 1806 to establish government authority over Malabar forests. Watson actually created a very controversial government monopoly over the forest areas in Malabar, and this led to a lot of discontentment among the people, and then eventually the conservatorship was abolished by the East India Company. So this slide actually shows the Calicut, city. And of course, on the right-hand side, you also see, again, you see a lot of vessels. Prince of Wales shooting water. Future King Edward VII actually shooting waters in Bepur near Calicut. Okay, about the teak plantations in Nilambur, after a brief respite caused by the timber monopoly, forest destruction, Malabar continued unabated, and Connolly, H.V. Connolly, then collector, reported to the government by 1840 that most of the mature timber in the natural forest had been completely removed, felled for naval purposes. Further, he assessed the Bombay dockyards yearly demand of teak timber from Malabar. It probably required at least 2,000 teak trees per annum, and given the rotation length of 60 years, he calculated that about 670 square kilometers of forest area would be required for making a sustainable supply of the projected quantity of teak timber to the Bombay shipbuilding dockyard. The Madras government accepted a scaled-down proposal from Connolly in 1842, and then subsequent to that, efforts were made to establish teak plantations in Nilambur in Malabar. Of course, the early attempts to raise teak nursery was a complete failure, and Connolly and his associates did not have any clue about how to germinate teak seeds even. In 1844, a disgusted Connolly actually appointed Chalk Menon as a conservator, and the duo could surmount the problems of getting teak seeds germinated, and their productive partnership lasted until the assassination of Connolly by the rebellious Maplas in 1855. Teak plantations flourished in Nilambur area, Malabar, and then by 1860-61, there was about 1,100 acres of teak plantations. And this is one of the remarkable success stories of the British East India Company to make man-made teak plantations for the first time in the world. So, coming to the modern times, for long periods in history of India, natural forests have been depleted and replaced with the farmlands. Monoculture plantations for timber and pulpwood. And you can see the left-hand side of the graph, you can see until the mid-70s, the forest cover, the forest area declined drastically, almost linearly. And thereafter it starts increasing, and of course it has kind of stabilized. Now the government official statistics say that India has got a relatively stable forest resource base, and it has been steadily increasing over a period of time. According to the most recent report, the total forest cover of India is about 71 million hectares, which is about 21.76% of the geographical area of India. However, the target of Indian government is to have 33% forest cover, and which is of course a long way. And the only way to do was that by utilizing the technique of agroforestry. And of course, India is the cradle of agroforestry, and there are a large number of agroforestry systems. Home gardens are particularly important in the Indian context. There are about 43 million hectares of potential area under agroforestry on a watershed basis. Okay, and therefore the government launched the National Agroforestry Policy in 2014. The pictures show the President of India launching this particular policy. Traditionally, agriculture and forestry were treated as separate watertight compartments. You see the wall between them. Of course, this policy actually intended to bring about convergence between agriculture and forestry. You see the wall has come now, and it aims to harmonize policies on either sides to facilitate credit, etc. And that takes me to my last slide. Bottom line, the key messages are there are about, more than 4,000 years ago, the Indus Valley culture thrived, or the Harappan culture thrived in the Indus Valley area. They built sophisticated cities and invented sewage systems that predated ancient Rome and engaged in trade with the settlements in Mesopotamia. Trade was important for them. And, the Mesopotamian records show that they imported timber and major products from the IVC area by 1800 BCE. This advanced culture had diminished. They started migrating to the foothills of Himalayas. And although changes in the Indian monsoon occurred, primarily because of climate change, although the changes in India's monsoon system occurred quickly on the geological time scale, they occurred much more slowly than the present day climate change. Cultures of the Indian subcontinent had maybe a long time, or hundreds of years, to adapt to these drier environmental conditions. In Mesopotamia, as you probably know, when aridity struck, they made technological advancements. They started to use irrigation. So also in Egypt, the Harappan people, however, instead of resorting to technological advancements, they migrated instead of that. But they did not probably or could not anticipate that their way of life could not survive this particular migration that they entered into. The people of the lower Indian peninsula, however, developed new technologies and new ways of adaptation, and they survived. The Harappans in the West, of course, despite their previous accomplishments, could not do that. And there have been waves of forest destruction different times, and also several attempts were also made to reforest or afforest right from the IVC period until the colonial times and afterwards. On that note, let me conclude. Thank you very much for the patient listening.
Dr. Kumar, thank you so much. That was terrific. I want to jump right into the questions because we don't have much time, but we have some really good questions. So if that's okay with you, let me go ahead. Okay, first one we received. Why was increasing saltiness in the Bay of Bengal a climate impact that was of concern for the people that live there? As an example, would increasing saltiness in the Bay of Bengal have affected their marine food source or navigation by way of impacts on open current?
Okay. Can I start?
Please go ahead. Yep.
Okay. So the increasing salinization or saltiness in the Bay of Bengal was primarily because of this drought-induced reduced discharges from the Godavari River. And that was the primary reason. There is, no clear idea about to what extent it might have affected navigation and all that, but certainly food supply might have been reduced because of this drought. And, there may be also kind of upsurge in this, sea levels maybe into the land area. So there are a lot of associated effects when the monsoon system actually failed and reduced summer showers and winter showers caused this increased salinization in the Bay of Bengal.
Okay. Here's a question. This was asked when you were showing slides or talking about the late Vedic period. Okay. This person, Brian asks, did they harvest and replant forests? So were they actively harvesting and
Oh,
replanting?
yeah. If I can answer that, maybe not from that later Vedic, even earlier, during the IVC time also, they started, there was some evidence which showed that, in some of these Harappan sites like Lothar and few other sites, there was tree planting around the villages. And it also concluded about 30 species, 33 species were kind of detected by analyzing the charcoal remnants and all that. Of that, about 3 or 4% were exotic species. That clearly indicates that trees were planted. Exotic, not in the current sense of the term exotic, but from other regions, they were planted. Then, of course, during the late Vedic period also, sustainability was the underlying theme of most of the transactions at that time. So people were planting, they were encouraging. Even Chanakya in Arthashastra recommended establishing monocultural plantations, afforestation by several instances. Even it continues up to the later Vedic and also the Maurya times. Emperor Ashoka decreed that trees should be planted on wastelands, including horticultural trees should be planted. Okay. And during the British time also this continued even now it is continued.
Do you know the history of wildfire in that region as well? Was it extensive? Were there periods of fire, less fire in other periods?
It's my guess. It could have been there, but I could not find any evidence of that. But, okay, the Aryans were using fire as a weapon to clear forests. So wildfires could have been a regular feature of these areas, but archaeological evidences, at least I could not encounter any archaeological evidences on that occurrence of wildfires. But certainly the Aryans were clearing forests using fire. They were burning the forest areas.
Okay. Mickey asked this question. Could you expand a bit more on the 3 different kinds of forests you mentioned from the Vedic period?
During the later Vedic period, the three times. Can I go back and show that slide? It's okay. Yeah,
Mickey also asked,
the forests of wealth, Shrivan. This is probably equivalent to our plantation forest. That's my guess anyway. Shrivan. The Vedic text mentioned about Shrivan. This is the forest of wealth. And then, of course, Tapovan, where, people, contemplate for peace and spirituality. There was a picture on the right-hand side of that particular slide, a sage doing penance or meditation in the wild environments. And also the third type was Mahavan. I think this is something equivalent to our protected areas today, my guess anyway, but where there was diverse kinds of species, plants and also animal species could coexist. So, primary aim of the Mahavan, of course, was kind of wild biodiversity conservation in the current parlance.
Okay.
Did I answer that point?
I think you answered it terrifically. We only have time for one more question, but I do want to get this one in. Karen asks, what place, if any, did the quote rights of nature end quote have an Indian tradition?
Can you repeat that once again?
What place?
Place, okay.
What do you find that in Indian tradition you have what is called, or beliefs what are called the rights of nature? Do nature have inherent rights according to Indian tradition?
I would say, that during the Vedic and late Vedic periods, the nature was to a great extent protected. Although in the beginning the Aryans actually deforested much of these areas, but subsequently they realized the importance of forests, and primarily they were also like the IVC. The Aryans were also requiring or using a lot of timber, so they were promoting the Aryan times, the late Vedic times, forest conservation, and of course, for afforestation efforts were made. And the Chanakya's text Arthashastra actually talks about the conservation values and the rights of the people. I mean, rights and responsibilities of the forest staff in conserving biodiversity. So all those things were documented. So to what extent these are all practiced in those days, this is anybody's guess. But maybe during the later Vedic times, the Maurya Empire, the time of Maurya Empire, probably this was done to a great extent, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. With that, Dr. Kumar, unfortunately, we have to end it there, but thank you so much for joining us. I know it's late there. We appreciate you staying up with us and sharing your thoughts and your reflections on the history of forests and peoples in that region of India. So thank you again so much.
Oh, I must thank you again. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you all once again.
Few things let me just wrap up with a few things. As a reminder, recordings of today's presentation will be available within several days on the Yale Forest Forum website. The slight delay that we have allows us to accurately caption each of the presentations and make sure that they're accessible to all. Slides will also be made available when possible, reference documents and readings will be linked on the Yale Forest Forum website. So always check back, and I can see that in Dr. Kumar's webpage, there are a number of references, so please check if you're interested. So next week, please join us for our final webinar next Thursday.
Okay.
Our speaker will be Carl Epun. Carl is Associate Professor of History and Italian Studies at New York University. Carl's talk will be on how to count and map trees in early modern Venice, the political values of precision.